Everyone has a smartphone, and we bring it with us everywhere we go. Of course, it can also tell us what time it is, but our phone is not a watch. Today, we're going to talk about the value of the good old-fashioned wristwatch. Hi, welcome to my channel. So glad you stopped by. If you like technology and gadgets and how they impact our modern life, you're in the right place. Be sure to click subscribe below. If you want to, you can add a comment in our comment section and tell us if there's any gadgets or technology you'd like us to do on a future show. But now let's talk about our topic for today. Within the past couple of years, I've noticed a trend with people. It seems like since they bring their phones everywhere with them, they don't really want to wear a watch anymore. Over the past decade or so, people have stopped wearing wristwatches. My best friend is a good example of this. Since he always has his phone with him, he can check the time whenever he wants. There are a couple of disadvantages to this, however. First off, as our phones get larger and more sophisticated, they get harder and harder to put in our pocket. So when we just want to check quickly what time it is, we have to go through the effort of sorting through our pocket or purse, which is not a discreet kind of thing to do. And if you want to check on the time while someone is droning on in a meeting, or if you want to make sure that you're not going to be late for something that you have to do, a quick look down onto the wrist makes things a lot more convenient and less obvious. Now, the smartphone companies have realized that people quit wearing wristwatches. They decided they should make their own. After all, we do want that discreet way of quickly checking the time. But they couldn't help themselves. They had to add all the other smartphone-type features to this little tiny screen. So smartphone companies came up with their own version of the watch, like this one. This is a particular Samsung model, and as you can see, it has a whole assortment of apps, not just telling you what time it is, but notifications, little tiny versions of bigger apps, and all sorts of extra special features. Now, if the purpose of a watch is for us to be able to check the time discreetly without letting everybody know what we're doing, the smartwatch kind of overdoes it. It's a little bit overkill. It's a little bit too much. Look at watches and how they've kind of affected the world. When the wristwatch was invented, it was based on its precursor, a pocket watch. The pocket watch was an amazing thing. It was a clock you could bring around with you in a small package that could be wound and would tell the time throughout the day. Before watches, you had to rely on church bells ringing or other kinds of public notices that it was time for something. And so time changed quite a bit by the wearing of watches and originally with the pocket watch. What I have here is a pocket watch that I came up with. This is indeed a pocket watch to be worn just like a regular pocket watch in every respect. However, inside this pocket watch case is a regular Apple Watch, and I thought it might be more convenient to carry the thing in my pocket, since every time you look at it, you kind of have to go through apps, much like your phone, which you already have in your pocket. The other issue with many of the watches, especially when they first came out, is that they only lit up and showed you the information you wanted to see when you lift your wrist or when you press a button. And after a moment, goodbye time. Now, of course, they have some always-on models now, which is certainly an improvement, but obviously battery life is a big issue. Battery life has become a large concern. When the thing was invented, the watch didn't have a battery life problem. It had a wind-it-up problem. When it ran out of juice, you had to wind it up and ask somebody else with a watch what time it was so that you could reset it. There are some great uses, however, for the smartwatch. I think checking our blood pressure, helping us to monitor our exercise, how many steps we've taken, using it as a pedometer. Any kinds of these uses make a smartwatch a worthy thing to have. We started getting watches that use batteries. Yes, the kind you don't have to wind. When these amazing devices first came out, one of the things that made everybody really want a battery-operated watch was the fact that it didn't have a traditional clock face. It would show you digits on the fancy liquid crystal display. Everybody wanted one. The late 70s, early 80s, everyone had a gray-colored display on their watch, popularized by companies like Casio and Timex. I'm still a big fan of Casio's watches. As you can see, the one right here, this one here that I have on my wrist is practically the standard. A lot of times, these watches had a rubber band attached to them, and the fact that they were made out of plastic was a big selling point. Of course, now, if we got a plastic watch, everybody would say that's kind of cheap, but indeed, having a watch made out of plastic is very practical. On the other hand, it's also not an heirloom. When watches, especially pocket watches, were first invented, they were a luxury item that you tended to have one of, and it would often be handed on to the next generation. The watch was a measure of a gentleman. That's a sexist comment, but that was the way things were. In any case, watches began to be finely tuned instruments, like fine jewelry, precision engineered, made by expert craftspeople. All these watches had a legacy, and they became very collectible. That's one of the downfalls of the smartwatch. It's an expensive device, and if we are not careful with it, it can break. That happened recently to my friend Cheryl. Crunch, there goes the watch. Now, if you rely on that watch to tell you the time, well, it's time for a new watch. So what makes a watch a practical accessory for today's person? Number one, some of the watches that have come out lately have a 10-year battery. With your average digital or analog battery-operated watch, there is nothing to do. No charging to remember, nothing that needs to be maintained, nothing that needs to be updated. There will never be a software update. It will always just tell you the time, and usually pretty accurately. Sometimes what's called for is simplicity. Do one thing and do it well, and your average battery-operated watch does just that. They might be inexpensive, but they are pretty much readily available, and no one will cry if something happens to it, because most of them can be had for less than $50. In fact, there's a trend now towards people picking up old-school digital watches like these because it's retro, and retro is in right now. Retro chic, the total 80s thing. You don't need a watch to do everything for everything all the time. On these watches, one of the neatest things is that they light up at night. There's a reason why wristwatches have remained popular even though other technologies and electronics have gotten so much more sophisticated. It's because they do what they say they're going to do, and they just work. For battery life, convenience, and reliability, you can't really do better than the traditional wristwatch. A decent watch can tell us the time for years to come, but now it's time to subscribe to this channel. Put your comments below if you'd like more about gadgets in your daily life, or to suggest a topic, or take a second to add your 2 cents. Thanks for taking the time to clock in, and I'll be back soon with another video.